Anybody who may be viewing live stream. If you are coming back to view later, we appreciate you coming back to view our meeting here in the town of Landis. Tonight we have a lengthy agenda, and so hold tight and buckle up. Maybe get out your popcorn if you're viewing, and we're going to get started. At this time, I would ask if everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We will also have a moment of silence. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time we will move to adopt the agenda. We will move to the consideration of removing item 13 and add item 18A, which will be the consideration appointment of an interim finance officer.
Mayor and Board, at this time, I move that we consider adopting the agenda with those two changes to remove 13 and add 18A accordingly.
I second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Do you want to?
We have next we will move to citizens' comments.
Yes.
We will do that prior to our public hearing. Let me get those sheets. We've had a lot of interest this evening in our public hearing, and I just want to make sure that anyone who wanted to speak was able to sign up. So if you arrived a few minutes ago and were not aware of signing up, here's the two items. I'm going to put them over here on the table for our public hearing, and then this is public comment. I have Nadine Cherry and Gary Martin. Is there anyone else that wanted to speak at the public comment section?
I just had a question.
Okay.
About the annex bid.
We can do that when we
Do I need to sign up for that? Or?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Which sheet do you need to sign?
You can just sign up for both of them, and then if we answer on the first one, you'll be good to go.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Again, we appreciate everyone attending and certainly welcome your comments for the public hearing. We will start with Ms. Nadine Cherry for public comments.
Nadine Cherry, 410 West Garden Street in Landis. I would like to know why citizens are still being allowed to place the garbage containers on the sidewalk. According to the American Disability Act, they should not be put on the sidewalk. The town of Landis policy even states to place your container behind the curbing. I have noticed containers being placed next to the storm drains, which allows grass clippings, small tree twigs, and other items to allow rainwater not to be able to go down the storm drain. If I remember correctly, Brandon Lynn spoke about some of these issues back in December of 2019. I believe he also stated we would be fined so much per day if we did not follow Denner's or the state's orders, whichever it was. Grass clippings are being allowed to be put in the streets. I would like to know when things are going to change. Yes, I know Rome wasn't built in a day. Thank you.
Ms. Cherry, I will address you. If you could please get us those addresses, or if you would like to let them know, we would appreciate that. Thank you.
Gary Martin.
I live at 301 South Central Avenue. My attention was is back in sometime last year, the town received money for the COVA. I don't know where that money went. I know that some things have been done, but where's the rest of it? You had a time limit on this money to spend this money. It can't be extended in any, on beyond. You have a time limit for this money to be spent. Where's it at?
Well, it's all in here, and we voted on it. And if you can go back online, you can look at the minutes where we voted on everything that was spent and how much it cost, and everything. It's all in there. You can go back. Do you remember what month that was? I think it was November that the quotes were brought to us.
It would have been around that time.
Yes.
It would be online.
Yes.
Well, it's been to my knowledge that you're going out here buying all the stuff, but you still are owing outstanding bills to other places. And I can prove this, what I'm saying. I can prove what I'm saying.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
That's all the public comments that we have for this evening.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move to the legislative public hearing, the 2040 Comprehensive Land Use Plan.
At this time, I ask for a motion to open the hearing.
So moved, Mayor.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Flo, it is all yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the public, members of the board, staff. My name is Rick Flo, and we have finally reached a point now where we're looking for public comment. The planning board worked on these for a number of months this past year, and we've got two things up tonight. And this first hearing is actually on the comprehensive land use plan. The town of Landis really has not had a up-to-date comprehensive land use plan for a long time. And one of the requirements going forward under the new statutes adopted by the General Assembly in Raleigh is to make sure that you have a plan. So when you're setting standards and specifications, or whether you're using taxpayer money or ratepayer money, or whether you're pursuing grant applications or funding applications, you need that guiding tool, sort of where are we headed as a community in the future, and that's what a comprehensive plan is. Now, the one for Landis is pretty straightforward. There's a map that's included in it for the land use topic, and that's the one that always gets people excited. But it's about 25 or 30 pages long, and it addresses a number of issues in the community. And that plan opens the door to you to be more effective in soliciting funding, whether it's loan funds or grant funds, and also to be more effective in your decision making. That decision making is the critical part. In the past, it was quite common for decision making to take place based on the folks in the room, who's standing there, who it is, what they're saying, and what have you, and that's still important. But the General Assembly and the legislature in Raleigh has decided that, well, if we're putting money into these communities, or we're authorizing them to manage development or any of these numerous topics, that we want to make sure that the town has some kind of snapshot of where it's going. So it's not just listening to me standing up here as a citizen and saying this is what I want. It gives you a reference guide to also look at the big picture, as it's known. And the big picture is what's intended to help make better decisions, particularly for ratepayers and taxpayers, and in land use. And that's really the subject that most people get excited about. When I say land use, I mean, which way are we growing in which way? Where is our emphasis going to be? Do we just chase zoning based on somebody's got a piece of property and this is what they want to do, and you decide yes or no? Or do you look at it, and make a rational decision? Because it can affect pipeline diameters for sewer or water, it can affect transportation improvements and so many other things. In the past, it might be something like, well, Ms. Seaford, her family's always been real nice to the town, and they did this and they did that. We'll approve her rezoning. But old Rick there, he's a scoundrel. He used to jump his bicycle through my rose bushes, and there's no way we're gonna approve his folks that wanna do a little subdivision or something like that. So the General Assembly in Raleigh is trying to take that subjectivity out of that decision making and make it more based on information, that you can follow, a logic to. And that's what the comprehensive plan is really about. So we have a map up here, and the draft was recommended to the governing board a month or so ago. We did a work session on all of this just recently. And so after that presentation, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor, for you to open it up to any public comments, and I'll be happy to address any questions that might come out of those comments.
All right. At this time, we will open it for open for public comments, if you have the sheets.
Nadine Cherry.
Nadine Cherry, 410 West Garden Street, Landis. This is a lot of information to digest in a short period of time. I know without a shadow of a doubt this will pass whether I agree with it or not. Send it back to Roy Cooper and tell him we are against it.
David Wood.
I live at 138 Twin Sisters Lane in Mooresville. The property I represent is on Ridge Avenue and part of 29. It used to be the old mobile home park there, you probably remember. I'm requesting that it goes mixed use too, because it's kind of strange. I've got commercial property beside me, housing beside me, and with this new road going 85, I don't think that property should be industrial like it is right now.
Okay, thank you so much.
Dean Johnson.
Brian.
Oh, Brian, I'm sorry.
I'm Brian Johnson, from 495 Lake Wright Road, but my property is off of 318 North Beaver Street. I got 7.3 acres out there that joins Mr. Wood and Mr. Corey, who will speak shortly. We've been trying to develop that corner for probably 10 to 15 years now without any real progress for one reason or another, mainly the economy, I'm sure. But we've had opportunity lately. We've had two pretty big developers reach out to us about doing either condominiums or townhomes. And we would like to pursue that. I think it'd be a nice addition to Landis. That's pretty much the entrance to Landis now. We got the new interchange. And I think it's like 1.7 miles straight in from that interchange to this site. So it is kind of the entrance to Landis now. So we're requesting that it could be rezoned to mixed use too, so that we would be able to present some of these projects that we've been offered to the town for approval.
All right, thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you.
Josh Seyfried.
Josh Safer, 2240 Flat Rock Road. Is there anything in the plans on coming down Flat Rock Road at all? That's why I'm here to find out.
I don't think so.
Somebody had mentioned it, it may have been incorrect information.
Mr. Flo, can you answer that?
Yeah, I'll be happy to try. I don't know what the subject is of the inquiry, but from the standpoint of any kind of changes to any of the zoning districts or anything like that, I mean, Flat Rock Road comes on down into town on Ryder, but that's it. If there's discussion about annexation, I've not been part of that.
Mr. Saber, are you speaking about annexation as far as
I think so.
Yeah.
Possibly expanding the town limits. I know it stops at the creek right here in the middle of Flat Rock Road at Sherrill Park. That's in the town of Landis. It is not.
No, it's
Actually,
only.
our corporate limits are delineated
That black line.
by the black line there, and then you can see the border line of it.
Yeah.
So from the elementary school up going towards
Not
you
Landis.
is county.
There's only 2 houses on the left-hand side and
Okay.
2 houses on the right-hand side. And when you head home, there'll be a welcome to Landis sign, and that's it. Everything else is county beyond that.
But there's no plans on reaching out that way any further.
It is voluntary, so we cannot come in and annex you.
So it's strictly voluntary because they changed the state law
Correct.
when Salisbury had their mishap.
I'd like to correct that.
Okay.
Involuntary annexation is still legitimate in North
Oh.
Carolina, but it is prohibitive to do it. In other words,
Oh.
it's so convoluted now that nobody's doing it. No, by nobody, I mean no towns are doing it. It's more after the South Carolina model now, which has affected a lot of towns in South Carolina. So it's not gone, but it's for all practical purposes, waste of words on the statute book. So most of it now is voluntary, which means if somebody were to walk in, that's why I'm a little nervous about giving an answer that we don't know anything about. Because we don't know anything today, but if somebody walks in the door tomorrow and says, hey, we'd like to annex this piece of property, or this piece of property, or this piece of property, that property owner asking us, then we would look at that.
You can jump to one specific spot.
Yeah.
Yes.
Voluntary annexation like that, it's called a non-contiguous or satellite annexation. Now, the limitations on it have to do with what's called the proximity rule to the primary corporate limits. And the way China Grove comes all the way around here to 152, that sort of cuts us off a little bit because you got Kannapolis here, so it would be limited to stuff right in that area right there. If somebody came to us and said, hey, we really want to be a part of Landis.
So I guess when I thought Landis Fire covers down to Sherrill Parks where I got it being in the city, that's correct. Landis Fire covers.
Fire district is larger than the city
Okay.
limits.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking in my mind then. I was just concerned. All right, I want to make sure.
And Mr. Seifert, we'd certainly love to have you in the town of Landis.
Well, we can get you a form because ever since we advertised the new zoning, we've had one request to be inside hours because of the new zoning, so. You might not know what you're missing.
I like having the farmland and pasture and all that in the city.
Well, I don't know.
Don't do it.
Mayor, I'm just noting on the map, the one specific request, or actually two requests that we had that really kind of relate to each other for the mixed use in this area
Okay.
on the future land use map. So that's on the land use map. I know that there was a comment about MU2, which is a zoning designation, and that hearing is slated for later on in this meeting.
Okay.
That's all I have on the list to speak, Mayor.
I thought it was on there.
Is Clark on there? Mr. Coyer, is he on the other one?
He's on the other one.
Oh, I might have signed the wrong one.
That's all right.
It's all right.
If you would like to
You can
speak
go
at
ahead and
this one,
speak.
you're
Yes,
welcome
Mr. Coyer, at
to.
this point in time, I think the board would be
Yeah.
fine with allowing.
Okay,
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. I thought-
No, you're
It's
fine,
okay.
sir.
I'm Clark Coyer. I actually live in China Grove as a competition, I guess. But I'm in the city, out in the country. But I lived in Landis for 23 years and I have owned property for 34 years in Landis. And it took me a while on this map to figure out where I was. And I think I'm the red with lines drawn through it.
Yes,
And
sir.
I think that means I'm in a WS3, and a clarification of that, I don't know watershed ruling, I don't know,
I think you're red. Is that not commercial?
it's commercial, but it's got lines
Lines
through
through
it. Is
Are you talking about here?
that, I am this,
Okay, you're in that slant, which is the WS3 and the WS4P, okay?
and
So you're in watershed. We can't do anything about that.
well, and that was the question I guess I have, does the town supersede the county in watershed, or do they have provisions to allow for more development than the county sets? Because I think the way that land is right now, we're in 24%, meaning we can only develop 24%, is that correct?
I'm just keeping up with the questions you're asking so I can try to make sure I answer them all. The first question that you ask is, can the town supersede the county? And that's more of a legal question, but generally speaking, the county does not have jurisdiction inside the town unless
Right.
there's some type of an arrangement, like for building inspections, okay?
Yeah.
So as far as watershed is concerned, that requirement is for the town to adopt for its own jurisdiction, and the county would adopt for its jurisdiction. So if you're in the town limits, you're in the town's watershed regulatory area. Right, Rick? I get that right?
Well, yes, the watershed's prompted by what? I thought that was federal regulation.
Well, it's a federal regulation from the feds to the state, and the state takes that hot potato and throws it at us as fast as they can. Okay, so it's a state watershed, was adopted in 1989. And so that's been around, and that sets those impervious areas which you're describing, that 24%. Now, some jurisdictions, like a county, may or may not exercise all of the flexibility tools that are inside those watershed regulations, and some municipalities do. So the general regulation of 24%, and I don't like shooting from the hip on the numbers. I'd rather look it up specifically. But if it's 24%, it's still 24%, whether you're in the county or in the town. Now, a lot of towns, however, have an easier time of managing what is referred to as the 1070 rule, which allows up to 70% impervious, based on certain criteria being met. I won't go into all the criteria because that's a little bit convoluted. But you typically see more towns that actually get involved in that because you got more intense development closer to the towns, usually.
Right.
Usually. So it's possible to do 70% impervious, provided you can meet the criteria.
Okay.
And that's contained in Article forgive me for not being able to quote these.
13?
No, sir, it's in either 19 or 20. It's the watershed one.
No, 19.
19.
We're looking at it. Thank you. Thank you, Alderman. So in Article 19, it describes which one it is, and as you can see on the map, there are two types. Now, the protected area is less restrictive than the critical area. The critical area is this part that's kind of close in and around the lake, for example. See that double hatch? That's the critical area. There's a lot less flexibility there than there is in the balance of the watershed, or what's called the protected area, which is that outlying area. And we're lucky to have, I say that facetiously, we're charged with protecting two watersheds here in Landis. Just like the city of Concord is lucky to have Kannapolis protect its watersheds. The city of Kannapolis has 4 watersheds that serve much of that water serves the city of Concord. So that's one of the blessings or curses, depending on how you look at it, that the state dealt us back in '89.
So is that all the questions? I'm lost too now.
So I sort of hit the watershed stuff that you were mostly.
So we
concerned
could,
with.
there's some provisions. There is there any where the town can offset land that would be more critical for development, which is along the 29? I mean, the town put in water, sewer, I mean, we have gas, we have 3-phase power.
Right.
Everything there, the town did, I would think, to make that so they could generate property taxes plus also sales taxes off of a business type environment. And we have had through the years people talk to us about something, but the 25% really causes problems because you're developing 1 acre out of 4.
That's right.
And the rest is a park or whatever.
Well, it's actually not development. It's the impervious area. It's
But
the
that's-
actual rooftop or pavement.
Or pavement.
So it can be a little more intense than that.
Yeah.
Now, with us being able to apply our 1070 rule, we have to allocate that because the 70% impervious is limited to not more than 10% of that watershed in our jurisdiction. So if we concentrate that in some intense areas, that's how we would spend it. That's the best recommendation.
Would it be
for how to
offset
spend
from
it.
something else?
It'd be offset by not going to 70% somewhere
Okay.
else, by sticking to 24% in other areas.
Okay.
Now, if you go into a typical 3 unit per acre neighborhood, okay, about 3 units per acre with streets, typical rooftop, typical driveways, things of that nature, you're generally gonna be ranging somewhere in the neighborhood of around 30% or a little more impervious at the most. So 24 is not too far off the mark in an SFR3. In an SFR2 or 1 where you're down to 2 units or 1 unit an acre, you're generally not gonna have a problem with it at 24.
Yeah.
Generally not gonna have a problem. So to get up above that 24, you wanna apply that, allocate that in strategic areas. So high value, mixed use type development is a perfect kind of candidate to see that. Now, most towns manage that based on a first come, first served basis. We're required to inventory it, and you'll see that spoken to in that Article 19. We're required to inventory that and track it, so we know how much of that 10% we've used up.
And but is there a possibility of one developer taking it all and leaving everybody else stranded? Is there
It would
some-
take a pretty good amount of land to do that.
So I have no
Yeah,
idea.
it would take a pretty good amount of land.
Well, we're not talking about our land, and the hope, and we've held this land for 20 years, and we've missed Winn-Dixie, and we've missed a food line deal, mainly because of some holdouts in the property.
Right.
And Landis, it even goes back 20-plus years ago, we had a church that wanted to go in there, we tried to keep it open. We wanna do what's good for Landis, and we haven't gone out there and put junk buildings or anything, it's just been vacant lot we paid on for 20, 30 years. We'd like to see something done with it, and we'd like to see something good for Landis done with it, but the watershed is a little bit of a hamper, and that's the main concern I have. I hope that any development that is considered around a Batesford Road, because there is some stuff gonna come there, I hope you'd consider it, makes the best sense for Landis, the developers, all the people involved. I know somebody makes money and somebody maybe look at that and think they shouldn't. Well, we've been a part of Landis for a long time, paid a lot of property taxes. If we finally get to see something happen, it would be really nice, but we'd like to see something nice in Landis. We're not really looking for a quick dollar. So, when it comes to the watershed, that was my biggest concern.
The 70% is not as tough as you think it is, because by the time you deal
Yeah.
with your planter beds in the, in landscape buffers and parking lot islands and all those kinds of things, all that adds up.
And so we are in commercial, we are basically unrestricted, or what are we? What is that? What does this red tell me?
This red is in the future land use map, this is not a restriction map. This is there's no laws or regulations about this map.
So what type?
This is a future land use, which is, highway commercial type of stuff is in this map. Now, and the purple is industrial or job type stuff. Now, if they change that to a mixed use area right there, then it would be a little bit lighter commercial, no big car dealership, for example, or no big industry type of thing in there, but you could actually increase your densities in residential. You could do apartments, you could do townhome type construction. Apartments, condos are the same thing as far as zoning is concerned, that we don't get into ownership, okay? So you could intensify that a little bit in there, and what have you. Now, the zoning map is where it actually, the law hits that's the law of the land, I like to refer to it. That's where the rules actually kick in. This informs these decisions.
It's hard, y'all are gonna vote on something tonight, and I think this is the first opportunity. Maybe we had other opportunities to see it. I'm sorry if we did. I didn't know that, but I'd like to study it a little bit before, but.
We understand that. We've had lots of public meetings, we kept this rolling until there was a recommendation from the planning board, which is what you're looking at up here. There was nothing else to act on, and unfortunately, the state has our, foot to the fire on the deadline. Okay, so we're up against the wall.
Let's just make good decisions, cause Landis' long-term health is dependent on property taxes and good revenue coming in from good business.
Most of these policies you're gonna find are actually more pro growth and development, but doing it in a qualitative way. So it sets quality standards, but opens up more opportunity.
Thank you. That's all of the people we have to speak on this particular hearing.
Okay. At this time, I'm asked for a motion to close the hearing.
Mayor, I move we close the public hearing, legislative public hearing for the 2040 Comprehensive Land Use Plan.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So we do not need to change the MU2 until the,
That's over here.
okay, just want to make sure.
Now, you can, modify the map, to show mixed use in that area. It's not necessary, primarily because mixed use is really a hybrid type of district, and commercial, business, things of that nature are the general category. We do have a general land use category for mixed use, so if you so choose, in making a motion, and there is a draft motion that includes any other comments that we received since the public hearing notices went out, that you could also direct that properties in that vicinity to be shown as mixed use too, as well, which I would suggest that whole area there, it doesn't change the underlying zoning. So if there's a business there now that has commercial, they can keep their commercial.
Excuse me.
Okay? It just opens up more possibilities if it is shown with the mixed use.
How many acres is that, a guesstimate?
Mr. Bryan and Mr. Woods, how many acres is that completely?
Well, there's 27.5 or 27.45 in what we've been working on with 8 different landowners for years now. All of them's not represented here tonight, so you can take about 5.3 acres out of that as far as what we're talking about tonight, where we're working with.
And most of the landowners are in agreement.
Oh, yeah, well, they have been for, matter of fact, they all laid on the sign, but Locklear drew it up for me about several years back for me to represent them on the sale of this land. That hasn't been changed, but as far as switching over to mixed use too, or making a change there, the only ones that's represented tonight are the 3 of us, Mr. Coyer, Mr. Wood, and myself.
So,
And that's a total of, 13, about 17.5 acres is represented with us 3 men.
go ahead, Mr. Stewart.
So, Mr. Flo, if you would, point me in the right direction as far as an understanding, because I'm not an expert career planner, so excuse my ignorance. But if we were to proceed forward with both the future land use map or the comprehensive land use plan, as well as the LDO to establish the official zoning map, as slated, what would be the next steps for them, for those property owners that have just spoken and their other members that are not absent, if they wanted to appeal to move it to an MU1 or 2?
What I would recommend is a general mixed use in the future land use plan for that whole quadrant of the intersection there. Then on the zoning map, only the specific properties that they represent.
Understood, thank you.
So you're looking at a generalization on the future land use map, you're looking at very specific on the zoning map. Now, that means if there's somebody that's not participating with you, they've got the option to sort of go down that path like you've got. It wouldn't make them non-conforming in any way, but they could remain zoned as they are on the draft map now in C29 or whatever the other category is. So that's how I would work the two. So you could designate this interchange here or intersection here as a mixed-use intersection on the northern quadrant.
Mr. Flo, when you were pointing at that, are you taking in the portion of red? Are you just taking in the portion of purple?
Both.
Both. So that would be Mr. Coyer's portion.
If I could ask them to kind of mark what they represent so that maybe there's something on
Brian,
this property.
Mr. Johnson, can you show to the corner
Do you
red?
include this one?
Clark, he's talking about yours.
Oh.
You want yours included on them mixed use too?
I have no idea, but.
This will be easier to see.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is David Wood, sitting beside me, and this is myself.
That's what we
What
would be
about
doing
that
right
one?
now.
That's the old chalkboard building, it's owned by, well, it was owned by Ron Horton until October, he sold to his company in Charlotte.
But are those people
We're
part of
trying to
this
do
group
it
that you're talking
now.
about?
Now,
Wow,
at this
you're
point,
doing
they
the-
said they would sell, but they didn't give us a price.
Okay.
They said they'd be interested in selling for the right price, that's what we've got out of it.
Well, from a future land use standpoint, it could even be mixed use on that, but I would be hesitant to take away industrial zoning on a piece of property that is so upfit for that at this time.
Could it be both though? Could it be industrial and mixed use?
Well, it can remain zoned industrial forever.
Yeah.
And it can be shown in the dream world, which is what this map is,
Okay.
in mixed use, so that if anything ever happened to that, they could either open another business there and keep industry going, they could change it to a different industry. But if they want to tear it down and build apartments or something like that, they could.
Okay. All right.
Are you holding yours?
They'd have to rezone it, but the map, the plan would say that direction is a good direction. You see, this is the guide.
Gotcha.
That's the law,
So you're gonna remove.
Okay.
if I may borrow that term.
Mr. Flo, what's actually required by the statutory mandate? Is it both have to be prepared
Yes.
and adopted?
Yes. The July 1 deadline of 2021 is that your ordinances all be updated and in compliance with the new chapter 160D as in David of the statutes. That replaces the old Article 19 of 160A as an amendment. The General Assembly got this backwards. So step 2 has to be done first, and step 1 doesn't have to be completed until next summer, in July 1 of 22. But if you don't have one of these, you can't adopt one of these. So Landis is in a unique situation of having to do both at one time. If you already had a comprehensive plan that was reasonably up to date, meaning not something done in 1978 or something like that, then you could possibly wait on the plan. But we need whatever plan you have now, if it was adopted in 1999 or whatever, and this, you have to find is consistent with that plan. Hence the reason to go ahead and do them both. Because times have changed so much in that period. Oh, I thought I had me a new mask.
Yep, very cool. My wife made
Does that answer your question? Has the Cinderella effect, basically, that if this is not done by next year, the planning piece, you actually, even if you adopted your ordinance for the land development, your zoning, what we'll call zoning, and it was fully compliant with 160D, but you had an old plan that was not compliant with the new statutes, and you failed to update it, or you failed to have one, then your zoning would expire, not just this July, but the next July. So they basically got a tripwire in there. If you don't do this by now, your old stuff expires. If you do the new stuff, but you don't have this by next year, your new stuff expires. Cinderella and the pumpkin style. The carriage turns back to the pumpkin at midnight on June 30th.
Does that have the corner, Brian? Does that have the piece on the corner?
Well, it does, but we're not addressing that one tonight because Rojas is not committed. I mean, he's committed to be willing to sell, but then we can't really give him no further than that.
And then Mr. Hawkins behind him.
Mr. Hawkins sold. I don't know who's got it now. JB sold last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And Ron Horton sold the old Carolina chalkboard in October
Okay.
of last year.
Mayor, you have someone over here that's raised their hand too.
Do we want to take comments? I think we were just clarifying for you can walk to the microphone. Ms. Cherry, you can go to the microphone.
Ms. Cherry, are you raising your hand because you'd like to speak or because you're having trouble hearing?
People are supposed to be using the microphone.
Okay, thank you.
Understood, thank you.
Is this one picking up?
Yes, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
All
Okay,
right.
so, what do we have to do now?
Okay. So, would you suggest, Mr. Flo, that we modify the future land use map for, the MU2?
The future land use map doesn't get specific like 1 or 2.
Okay.
It's just mixed use.
Oh,
or
I
it's
meant mixed
business
use.
or
Yes,
commercial.
sorry. Just mixed use.
Because the MU2 has a lighter version of commercial in it, it's not inconsistent with the way the map is shown now
Okay.
with commercial and industrial,
Okay.
okay? So, the problem with computers is they won't let you draw it softer.
Right.
When we did this in hand for many years, you could sort of soften up and it didn't look so rigid like a zoning map, but because of computers, they look just like a doggone zoning map. right?
Okay.
So, and that's what's throwing everybody off, I think, is this looks just as precise as that does.
I agree.
And-
Okay.
But it's supposed to be more generalized than that is. So I don't see any inconsistency with the way that it is, but I think if you did create an MU district, I've drawn something that I think would be good. It doesn't bind the zoning.
Okay.
It just guides you to, well, how about more apartments? Then maybe that would encourage that.
Okay, thank
And
you
it
so much.
informs the private sector to see what the potential is, so they can say, well, it may be zoned this now, but it's got the potential, if we buy it, to become more of what we're striving for. That's the way a developer should use a future land use map. Zoning maps are usually basically what you have today, with maybe just a few hints towards the future. So you don't throw somebody under the bus that currently owns an industry or currently owns a home.
Would it
Thank
be
you.
appropriate at this time for you to explain to everyone how you go about petitioning the town to modify or change the zoning? Do you wanna get into that?
Be happy to. The ordinance itself is really where that's captured, but I can give a summary now. The plan is that general vision for the future. The ordinance designates specifically what the standards and specifications are for every individual piece of property in the town, okay? If there's something on that zoning map that someone wishes to change, let's say for example, I've got an old industry, an old building that was there and had people working every day, and we made stuff. But let's say I wanna tear it down, or I could pick another one out, there's one next door. And I wanted to tear it down and I wanted to build something else, okay? I wanted to build a research campus like they did in Kannapolis, or I wanted to build some apartments or something like that. Then all I need to do is submit a letter representing the property, and there's specifications in Article 5 of the new development ordinance that state who can make that application. So I can't just run around, picking out property and rezoning it. That would designate what, on that application or on that letter, what they would like for it to be. Once that happens, we take that recommendation or that request to the planning board. Now, this is a requirement of the general statutes, and the planning board has to be a separate board than the governing board. And the planning board would look at this future vision, which is sort of looking big picture at the whole town down the road, and they would then compare that to the request that that individual is making on that property. And they would make a recommendation to the governing board. Their role is to be the visionary. Their role is not to be lobbied. Their role is not to be, looking at, well, so-and-so lives next door, or so-and-so used to do this or that. They're supposed to solely look at the big picture without regard for who owns something or whatever it is today. Just where are we going? That visionary role. The governing board then holds a hearing, like we're doing right now, what's called a legislative public hearing. I put the word public in it. The state took the word public out of it. They call it just a legislative hearing now. What we used to call public hearings on zoning, they're now legislative hearings. That legislative public hearing is where this board takes into account the planning board's recommendation, which they are holding in their hand, which is what you're looking at on the wall. Let's say it's a zoning map. They hold that visionary recommendation from the planning board in one hand, and then they listen to the public who says, well, I don't want any doggone apartments in my backyard, or I don't want a dog park in my front yard, I don't like people, I don't like anything, don't do it. And they get the distinguished pleasure of making that decision. When they do, they adopt that through a little ordinance that basically says we're changing from X to Y. Then we change the map, we re-upload it, there you have it. So it's quite a simple process. It takes a planning board meeting and a governing board meeting, so allow a couple of months, depending on when you get started. Because you start the day after they just met, you've got a little time before their next meeting, but that's all it takes.
Can you just touch on the notice requirements that are incorporated in that?
Absolutely. The notice requirements for a legislative public hearing require two things. Number one would be a newspaper notice published twice. The first notification at least 10 days ahead of the governing board's hearing, but not more than 25 days ahead. The second notice would be basically a week later. Okay? In addition to that, there's a mailed notification that would go to all the property owners that abut the property and those in the immediate area, right around it, within a certain distance, across the street, all that kind of stuff. So, in addition to the newspaper notice, in addition to the mail notice, there's also a sign, very nice sign, that goes with all this, that also invites everybody to the hearing. So it's intended to make sure that anybody that might have an interest in that area, whether they received it in the mail, saw it in the newspaper, or drove by it, or walked by it and saw it on the sign, is aware of that hearing.
So, Mr. Flo, the area that we've circled there is predominantly purple on the future land use map. Does that make it conducive with an MU too? Because I was thinking that would be brown.
It would be, MU2, if we wanted to go specifically mixed use, would be, okay? It would be. The industrial, because right now there's still some property owners that are not represented in the room.
Okay.
Might cause you to say, well, let's constrict that a little bit more, and so you constrict it on one side, that is residential encroachment, but you keep the door open on the other side, which is industrial job creation. And therein lies kind of the quandary. If you zone it MU2, then chances of an expansion of the industrial side are very limited. If you don't expand it, then you could argue that residential is softer than the industrial. So we're coming in less intense than what the eligibility is. Now, when you get to the zoning map, that's where it begins to create real issues. Traditionally, if we have residential butting right up around that industrial, it's not gonna be long before the phone rings and people say, well, I've only lived here 2 days, and that factory that's been there for 50 years is making too much noise. Is there anything y'all can do about that for me? Even though I knew it was there when I bought my place and moved in, I'm still gonna do it that way. And so I tend to recommend that boards always remember that you're representing the business community just like you're representing the resident community, and both need to be considered. I see it all the time where residential encroachment into business areas will cause businesses to start to feel unwelcome. And so that's a conscious decision. I wish that this other property owner were here so we knew what their feeling was. They might say, I'm fine with leaving the door open for mixed use over here, but don't yank the rug out from under my feet today. And here's the reason. If that's an operating business, is it an operating business?
They just storing stuff in there, storing supplies from their business in Charlotte.
It's operating to some degree. The problem that the grandfather clause, and I'm gonna borrow an old term, it's actually called a non-conforming use, which means when it went in, it was legitimate. Okay? When it went in, it was totally legitimate. And then if the rules change, and it becomes what people refer to as grandfathered, that doesn't sound like too big a deal. And it was never a big deal until the Dodd-Frank Act passed right after the recession 10, 11 years ago. When that happened, we started seeing the financial industry having to modify its policies to minimize its risk. And the financial industry is made up of two things that affect the general consumer, whether you're a business consumer or a residential consumer. That is lending, and that is insurance. And if they've got a building there that is suddenly a non-conforming use or grandfathered in, and it's damaged to a certain extent and cannot be replaced or restored, then it goes from being maybe a 50% loss to a 100% loss. So the risk is greater. And so we see more attention being paid by the financial industry, insurance and lending, mortgage lending predominantly, much more attentive to those status issues now. So it's not an easy question, okay? That's one of the reasons, Mayor, why I suggested that you could possibly leave it on the future land use map and adjust only the properties that are represented here
Okay.
on the zoning map. And then if in the future additional properties wanted to pursue that, then you could at that time also modify your land use map.
Okay. All right, at this time, we will consider a motion to adopt.
Long-winded way to go, wasn't it?
Mayor and Board, I move that we consider to adopt the 2040 Comprehensive Land Use Plan as presented.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we will have the legislative public hearing for the Landis Development Ordinance.
Do I have a motion to open the hearing?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Uh,
We'll turn it over to Mr. Flow for the presentation.
There's not a lot that I can say about the zoning map that hasn't been said already. So I don't think I'm gonna repeat myself on the zoning map. What I would like to do, though, is sort of step away from the zoning map and talk a little bit about what the development ordinance really does overall. I think this is very important. For many years, the town of Landis had a development ordinance that when we tested it, it simply didn't work. And when I say tested, I mean we applied the standards of that ordinance to some real-world type applications to see what would it yield in terms of development potential. And what we found was that it really was off base in many regards from the technical standards and specifications. So a big part of the zoning ordinance is about modernizing it. I'm gonna give you an example. In your R8 here, you yield an effective yield somewhere in the neighborhood of the equivalent of an R16, which is almost half of what is stated. When testing your ordinance today under R8 yields 4.34 units per acre in theory, but in real application and practice yields about 2.5 units. Okay, so it was way off the mark, and that's based on some what I call hidden provisions. In other words, it wasn't clear. You said this, but then these other little trap doors or bear traps or whatever you want to call it created a different scenario. And that sometimes causes developers who might look at a piece of property and say, well, we're gonna put this 40 acres or whatever under contract because we found out from the town that we can do, 8,000 square foot lots. Okay? And then when they get through all the details, their surveyor and engineer does all this work and they find out that it doesn't work that way. We've got to do at least 200 feet deep because of this provision. And we got another provision that says that the width can't be less than 40% of the depth. So now we gotta go to an 80 foot where it says 70 in the ordinance. Now we got an 80 by 200, which is precisely 16,000 square feet, which means your R8 actually is an R16. So the point is that when people test it, their expectations are set, and they find out very quickly that they're not gonna be met in the real world, and that's not good policy. So we're modernizing your standards and specifications to actually fit the development industry, the markets, and also to yield what they say they're gonna yield. Under the SFR3 example, which is kind of the go-to normal new subdivision type of density, about 3 units an acre with some straightforward standards and specifications. So basically a developer can purchase the property. If it's on SFR3, it's gonna be very straightforward. It's paint by numbers. Follow the ordinance and you just move right on along with your project. And what they'll find is that the actual yield on the tested on the samples was 2.88. Now, if you buy a big piece of property with a whole bunch of floodplain, it's gonna be different. But generally speaking, it yields 2.88, right at 2.9. That's pretty doggone close to the stated 3 units per acre. Totally different than where you are today, where you're basically 100% off on the minimum requirements and 50% of the yield. So that's an example of how the standards and specs work. The other thing is the statutes that changed in Raleigh. I mentioned a little while ago, the 160D, as in David. One of the things that does is it basically says to the towns to really spell out standards and specifications for whatever type of development it is, rather than having a subjective process where a planning board, where you go kneel down to a planning board and ask them to approve your subdivision. You now spell it out in the ordinance. The planning board just simply makes recommendations on things like the rezoning, if there is a rezoning involved. Or they might wanna look at the plat and comment to staff about something they might feel is important. You know, like we're close to this school, could we possibly maybe look at moving the entrance a little bit or something like that. So they basically are going from being an approval body to now being purely advisory to the governing board and to staff. Okay, so unless there's a rezoning involved, it's pretty much straightforward, goes through staff. Now, the new standards also, though, define the processes for evidentiary-based hearings, what we used to call conditional use zoning in North Carolina. That's gone now. Conditional use zoning, special use zoning are gone. There's this thing called conditional zoning, which is essentially adjusting something, like that MU2 we talked about. If somebody says, well, we wanna do MU2, but there was a real concern because of that traffic at that corner there that we limit ice cream from not being too close to the corner, then you could put that condition in there and everything else would be pretty much straightforward. That's all it really is you basically peel something out of it, you don't add stuff to it. So there's no more making up conditions out of the blue.
Okay.
Okay? So that's kind of where we are. It streamlines, satisfies all the state requirements, and makes life easier for the people that live in neighborhoods and what have you. One big thing I want to point out is that there are areas under the old zoning that were treating the old neighborhoods as if they were areas that could be redeveloped easily, and they're not. You know, when you apply new subdivision standards to older areas, a lot of times you create a lot of those non-conformities or grandfathered situations. So we actually now have a district that is really about the old mill villages. It's really about that with reduced setbacks and things of that nature. When Kannapolis first incorporated, the county had zoning out there that required 30-foot front setbacks in the mill villages, which consisted of several thousand houses. Every one of those houses became non-conforming the day the ordinance was adopted. So what we've come up with is its own zoning for that area. I call those areas the BZ areas. They developed before there was zoning. So we've applied, Mayor, tons of common sense. Thank you.
All right, at this time, we will ask for public comments. Do you have those?
Nadine Cherry.
Nadine Cherry, 14 West Garden Street in Landis. I do not think duplexes or triplexes should be allowed to be built in with R8 single-family residences. Will they have to plant large trees on the property? What about sidewalks? Who will be responsible for the upkeep, the maintenance on them?
David Wood.
I guess right now I'm requesting my property be zoned to mixed use too. And my only question is, can y'all do it now, or do I have to petition out on this?
It was this one right here, right?
This is my property here.
This is your property here, just that one.
Just that, them right up there, like 6 acres there.
And that's the way it's shaped.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I'm just making these notes for the record, Mayor.
Thank you.
Do I have to have petition or?
Not if they do it as part of this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Johnson.
I'm good unless I need to come up and just restate it again.
Please, if you would mind.
Miss
Mr.
Cherry, if
Johnson.
you have a concern, if you can please go up to the mic so that we can hear your concern, so that it is also verbally spoken out clearly.
You know that everybody is supposed to be speaking from that microphone.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm Brian Johnson, and I just feel like you've done a great job in answering all my questions. If you need me to mark out my potential property or my property, I'll be glad to point out to you.
If you're gonna make a
Please.
request, we wanna mark it
Yes,
out.
Please do.
I'm requesting that mine be rezoned to MH2.
So is it this piece right here?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and that's all it is, right there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, and we will be speaking to these folks and see if they will do the same thing. Ron Horton, or well, it was Ron Horton.
Okay, none of the red, just out of that purple.
That's Mr. Porter's here.
Okay, just speak to that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Clark Coyer.
He'll pass.
Yeah.
Do you,
I would like to ask.
Mr. Corey, please do. if
hold
you
on
don't
just
mind.
a second for me in the back.
Yeah, we wanna make sure we get exactly, I think you've identified these two, Mr. Corey, earlier when we were talking about the plan.
Well, I think my interest would be to stay commercial, which would be least restrictive. Probably would not be for housing, would that be right?
That's right, correct. No, no residential in the C-29, that reserves that for commercial.
But if back property of mine, it's 600 feet deep, were needed, it could be changed or zoned later?
Subject to that process, the Planning Board Act and this governing board, there's no promises that can be made about
I
it.
think-
You can apply for the change
Yeah.
later, absolutely.
I think for the most, commercial was where I would want it to stay.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Josh Seyfried.
I'm gonna pass.
Pass on Mr. Seyfried.
That's all we have for comments.
All right, and the gentleman in the back, if you could please come to the microphone and state your name, we will allow you to speak or ask your question, sir.
Nathan Graham, I purchased a property on Kimball Loop. It's one of the properties that looks like it would be addressed in the zoning. My question is, do we have any of the public works addressed in this new map or any kind of zoning requirements at all? Is any of the public works being addressed?
Before that, real quick, and Mr. Floyd, you answer, could you identify, Mr. Graham, your property off Kimball Loop?
I'm on the loop. I own several properties on the loop here. I think Mr. Flo said it'd turn into a, what'd you say, an FS3?
That's FR3.
FSR3. My question is, are any of the public works being addressed?
Well, when you say public works, if you're referring to, let's say, water and sewer first.
Right.
Water and sewer for, whatever water and sewer is in the area is in the area. For a new subdivision, if you're doing a major subdivision, like 50 lots and cutting in a street, and things like that, then the developer is responsible for the extension and installation of that infrastructure, just like the new street trees, sidewalks, street lights, etc.
So when you talk about the sidewalks, I know a lot of the streets, even these back streets, they are actually state maintained. They are not maintained by the city. So she actually had a good question. If we're gonna be addressing the sidewalks, would the city be taking over a sidewalk if we have to create one?
It depends on if it's a state maintained or a town maintained street.
There's barely any town maintained streets.
Well, let's say, for example, that a new major subdivision that was building new streets.
Right.
Okay, then it would be up to the town to decide whether they're going to accept them or whether the state accepts them. I generally recommend that the town take on new streets immediately after they're constructed. There's a warranty period, and an inspection period, things of that nature, but I mean, don't wait 20 years. So that they can then pull and attract the gas tax money
Yeah.
from Raleigh back here while the street's in great condition, so we can stockpile a little bit for maintenance. So I recommend that the acceptance of public streets into a local power bill system is really the final step in the subdivision process.
Yeah.
They don't have to do that, because the state does an absolutely horrible job at doing neighborhood stuff. They're geared up for
Yeah.
I-85 and Cannon Boulevard, but they'll send 20 trucks out to clean the end of a pipe out. You know, I've seen that. So my recommendation is that the town be open to that going forward. Now,
Well, that was gonna be my next question.
Yeah, the side-
Would the town be open to taking over some of these side streets?
that you're looking at me, so I'm gonna answer. Again, my
Well,
recommendation
looking
is
at the
for
mayor
new
as well,
streets, for the newly constructed streets. Taking over old problems, that's something they'd have to examine.
Yeah,
The governing board or the state?
The governing
the
board.
governing
Yeah.
board.
So my request would be that the governing board actually look at some of these side streets and take these over, because our public works are being overrun by state problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cause I mean, when we have to put in a new sewer tap, for instance, well, now we have to decide whether is the city gonna deal with the road? Do we gotta cut the road? What are we gonna do with the road? Well, it's a state-owned and maintained road. So now everyone's looking at each other like, well, what are we gonna do with the road? So if we're gonna try to upgrade the city, I think we should be maybe looking at taking over, cause Kannapolis did. Kannapolis took over a lot of their little side streets. Now, a lot of their stuff is city maintained. And here in Landis, basically 90% of all streets, even side streets, are state-owned and maintained.
What exactly is your address?
330 Kimball Loop. So I guess it's a two-part question, is with the public works and the roads being state maintained.
The public works are generally not state maintained, only the roads. are.
Right.
So, Mr. Graham, if you don't mind, I'm trying to understand your question thoroughly. Does it relate to actually Kimball Loop? Or are you talking about Mount Moriah Church Road? Mount Moriah is a state NCDOT maintained road.
So is Kimball Loop.
Kimball Loop should be on our town POW bill.
It should
You
be-
would think so, but it's not.
And we're 100, okay, I'm looking, give me just a second.
I'm just trying to understand your question.
Well, my
Is it-
question was,
Is it a
is some
general
of the
question, or
new
is it
zoning-
specific, to Kimball Loop?
No, I mean, it was pretty generic. Is the new zoning addressing any of the public works? And then we just kinda got into some of the road issues,
Sure.
but.
So I think maybe some of your concerns might be around what the town is required to do when we have to work with a state-maintained road. Because what happens is the way we have to repair that state-maintained road, if we have to run a water or sewer line under that state-maintained road, the repair of that is very different than what the repair is for the town. And then
Right.
who absorbs that cost is very
Exactly.
different. I think that's probably where you're headed.
So a lot of that is exactly my question, because we're being told that the road, if the road has to be cut, or the road has to be, messed with, then it has to be brought back up to a state standard, which is overwhelmingly more than what the city would require. If you go to any of the city roads that the city maintains, when they cut a street, there is minimal requirements to what they have to do to bring that road back up. Just as far as like minimal amounts of asphalt. Well, if you go back and look at the state requirements, it's flowable fill, 10 foot of packed 57 stone. I mean, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars to repair that road. When it comes, and all we want to do is tap into the city sewer. Does that make sense?
I'd like to address this, Mayor, if I may. The
By all
zoning,
means.
and development ordinance doesn't actually deal with repairs, okay?
Right.
So a repair on a state road is a repair on a state road, a repair on a
Sure.
town street is a repair on a town street. The standards and specifications are largely for new development, okay? So when you're
Yeah, but
building
all of
new
our
streets.
land is old land.
I understand, but when there's new, it's gonna be done new now, and there's not a place to put it. It's not actually even authorized under the statutes to put maintenance of old roads into this ordinance.
But what about goes back to our public works? We're tying into the city water and city sewer. So now we've got a conflict of interest between, okay, how are we gonna deal with the road that we have to get up underneath to tie into it? So if we're gonna develop the city, we kinda gotta address some of the road, public works, plus the zoning issues. Does that make sense?
The only answer to that, Mayor, would be if you were to consider transferring roads at some point in the future,
Yeah.
but I don't think this is the hearing for that.
Right, I agree.
Okay.
But that's the solution. Sorry, this doesn't deal with your problem, but there is a solution to your problem to make it more uniform.
Yeah.
And it may not be that can be done anytime soon. I can't make any kind of commitments like that because the boss lady over here is gonna get me.
Well, I was just noticing some of our new ordinance do come into sidewalks and curb and gutter. I mean, how are we gonna address that if we're tying into a state maintained road? Does that make sense?
The
That's gonna be very
improvements-
difficult.
The improvements would be applicable on both state
State
and
and
local
local.
streets, including private streets. The standards are the same. The town is establishing standards that are consistent regardless of whether it's gonna be state or local or private.
Very good.
Thank you, sir.
That's all of the comments we have at this point.
At this time, I ask for a motion to close the hearing.
Mayor, I move we close the public legislative hearing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead, Mr. Stewart.
Mayor and Board, at this time, I move that we consider, that we may have a motion to adopt the Landis Development
Hold on
Ordinance.
just a
Wait a
minute.
minute, we need to think about what you wanna do about
Yeah, we
these
need to
other areas.
modify. Sorry.
There were several, if I may, there were
Yes.
several comments that have been submitted between the time that the public hearing notification went out and tonight. There is a draft motion that was prepared just for your convenience on the development ordinance itself. And it includes a description and documentation for the record of those various requests that came in. Some were in response to people that got the out-of-town notice that contacted us and said, this is what I would like. So if you elect to make a motion that is inclusive of those changes, they are attached in that exhibit with the motion. If you choose to add any additional changes based on the public input you've received tonight, such as to add these MU2s that were noted on this map on the wall, that's why I made them up here so we've got a reference. Then that draft motion that was submitted would simply need to be amended to also include the two MU2 properties totaling, X number of acres, was it about 25 acres, I think?
22 and a half, maybe?
22 and a half in this vicinity as noted on this map. That way we can provide Amber with the documentation for the minutes as to what changes since the planning board recommendation was received by you that you are including in your motion to adopt. Does that make sense, everyone? Any questions of the board?
No, I have no questions. Questions, anyone? All right, Mr. Stewart, if you could start with these motions, and then we'll also have a motion to make that MU2.
And I can add that in as number 4 of that.
Sure.
Mayor and Board, I move that we adopt the Landis Development Ordinance along with the official zoning map and draft the technical standards and specifications manual with stipulation that we are approving 4 sets of revisions to the official zoning map as detailed in Exhibit A, and as they appear on the updated official zoning map dated May 10th as follows. The Number one, the two contiguous parcels were revised from SFR3 to C29, which are parcel ID numbers as follows. Parcel ID number 133A072 and 133A073. Number two contiguous parcels were missing zoning designations in the March 22nd, 2021 draft official zoning map. The two parcels have now received the following zoning district designations, which are parcel ID numbers as follows. 132C008 is now shown as SFR2 designation, and parcel ID 132-014-000-00001 is now shown with a CIV civic designation. Number three, a group of 56 contiguous parcels were revised from SFR2 to SFR1, parcels shown and listed on Exhibit A, and with four being the two properties that Mr. Wood and Mr. Johnson have described as comprising of approximately 22.5 acres to be petitioned to be rezoned MU2.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any discussion, Mr. Stewart?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. At this time, we will ask for a motion to consider the adopted minutes from April the 12th, 2021, and April the 28th, 2021.
Mayor, I think we need to do
Oh.
F and G.
I'm sorry, I was moving too fast. All right, consider motion to adopt the statement of consistency and
Mayor and Board,
reasonableness.
I move that we adopt the statement of consistency and reasonableness for the Town of Landis Development Ordinance.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We'll move to G. To adopt the rules and procedures for both the Planning Board and the Board of Adjustments. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Now we will move to number 8, and we will consider to adopt the minutes from April the 12th, 2021 to April the 28th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I move that we adopt the minutes from April 12th and April 28th meetings of 2021.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Seifert, it is officially your turn.
Okay, thank you. So tonight, as you can tell, we have a lengthy agenda, and so I have tried to include on our consent agenda a number of items that you are familiar with or that are just a matter of formality. So I will go over those briefly, and then we can entertain, if you would like, a motion to adopt them all in one opportunity here. We received a request from the North Carolina Department of Transportation to certify a proposed speed limit of 45 miles per hour on Old Beatty Ford Road and SR 1221 in Rowan County. That is already the speed limit there. They're just asking for you to endorse that ordinance. We are also working as a leadership team to bring to you monthly new policies and procedures. This month for you, we have a contract authority policy and a travel policy. The contract authority policy will speak to the dollar limits that I am allowed to sign and then bring to you as information, and those that require me coming to you first and then you getting your approval and signing them. We also have a budget amendment number 11. This is really a technicality. It should have been included when we brought you budget amendment number 9, which transfers funds from the water fund to pay off some debt, and it moves it to the sewer side that will then pay it off, and it really is just a formality. that was inadvertently left out when we presented number 9 to you. We also received a request to consider approval of bylaw changes from the Rowan EDC Board. That is included in its entirety with you, but they have to receive a signed request or signed approval from each municipality within the county to be able to move forward with that, and they're just asking for your approval on that. And finally, in the consent agenda, we have an audit contract. You approved Martin Starnes and Associates last month as your CPA firm for this year's audit. This is just the contract that follows that, and it has to, the contract itself has to receive approval.
Do I have a motion to consider the consent agenda?
I make a motion to do so.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Ms. Seifert, currently, is there, in respect to the contract authority, is there any policy and procedure currently in place, or is this something new?
No, there is not anything in place.
Any more questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
We will now move to number 10, public safety employee recognition.
Good evening. I have the distinct pleasure tonight to recognize one of our public safety employees. I'd like to go ahead and ask Detective Sergeant Shane Seifert to step to the front. Everyone's probably familiar with Detective Seifert. He's a common presence here. He's the one that makes sure, more often than not, hopefully, that these live streams go well. And let's see if I can actually. So far today, so good. Is this working?
Yes.
All right. So tonight, I'd like to recognize Detective Sergeant Shane Seifert. He's been a member total of 10 years with the Landis Police Department. Of those, Seifert, excuse me, I keep getting corrected, Seifert.
Sorry, it's that southern.
Yes, Detective Sergeant Shane Seifert. He's been with us a total of 10 years with the Landis Police Department. He has been an investigator for over 7 of those years. You may remember I had the pleasure of recognizing him a few months ago for this advanced law enforcement certificate, and he does a great job for the town. Tonight we want to award him with his Meritorious Service Award. I'll go ahead and read that for you. It says, for many years of exceptional investigatory skill, knowledge, and professionalism in the relentless pursuit of justice for victims of crimes. If you see it in our recent press releases, you'll know that he's been following and working on nonstop the murder of Timothy Hall, which occurred in Landis back on August 16th, 2019. Through his diligent work with our partners at the SBI and other state and local agencies, they're able to make an additional arrest last month on April the 25th. So now we have 2 arrests in that case through all of his hard work and dedication. We wanted to make sure we recognize him tonight because this will be his last board meeting attending as an employee of the town of Landis. So I'm sad to say that he has moved on to another opportunity. So we're happy for him and his new endeavor, but we're sad to see him go. And we definitely have some big shoes to fill once you leave. But I want to be the first to congratulate you and thank you for your hard work for the town. Appreciate everybody too, for sure.
So Mayor and Board, next on our agenda is to consider a contract with Axon for the purchase of body cameras and tasers for our police officers and the corresponding budget amendment to fund the initial purchase. Mr. Lachetti is here to speak and answer any questions that you might have.
At this time, do we have any questions for Mr. Lachetti?
Perfect.
I think we
You know,
will.
I misspoke. I just have one as it arises from a comment of a citizen as it relates to body cameras. When these tasers are activated, it automatically will record from the body cam, correct?
Yes, so what you are voting on tonight is for a contract with Axon. That includes the Axon Body Camera 3 and the Taser 7. The Taser 7 is their latest and greatest technologically advanced taser. It is compatible with that body cam I just mentioned. So as long as the body camera is on and active, so it's in a running state, not necessarily recording, just in a on state, like a standby state, the minute they flip that taser on, it automatically activates the recording function of that body camera, thus reducing the likelihood of an officer in a split-second decision or a use of force scenario that happens, we see it all too often, quickly. They don't have to worry about activating that body camera. As long as it was on standby or already on, the minute they activate that taser, it goes back and starts recording from that moment.
And maybe this is just a question as it relates to your body camera policy. With any interaction, traffic stops, et cetera, are the body cams, are they recording or on?
So we will be adopting and have in place a policy that directs when officers are required to activate their body cameras. It is my intention that most citizen encounters are recorded. There'll be scenarios where that may not be the case, such as speaking to a victim of a crime. Perhaps if they're a sensitive subject, like a sexual assault, they don't want to be on camera for that particular incidents if they are like the victim. But more than likely or not, when that encounter is occurring, it will be recorded. It's going to be the exception to the rule to have it not recorded. But there will be some leeway in the policy to allow for that, given a particular situation.
Thank you very much. I know that was a tangent on the consideration of the contract, so thank you for that explanation.
I do have two questions. At the end of the 5 years, I mean, I know technology changes daily. Will it be ongoing? Will they take us up year for year, or do we just change how will that work at the end of the 5 years?
Right, so this is a 5-year contract. This includes all necessary implementation with hardware, software. The biggest expense that any agency will face is the online storage. This is taser cartridges, everything we would need to be up and running. The nice thing about this contract is it's a full warranty on all the products we're buying. It also includes a refresh, as they call it, at year 2.5 and 5. So halfway through the contract, we get the new latest and greatest body cameras. At the end of 5 years, we'll also get refreshed. Then it's up to the town to keep that service going with online storage and whatever our needs are at the end of that contract.
And then I'm assuming that if you don't, you'll be putting in a taser policy and all the officers will be going through that.
Yes, so we currently have a taser policy.
Okay.
We have an in-house instructor already. Part of this contract includes sending another person to be a taser instructor. So we'll have 2 in-house instructors. They'll be fully trained staff, and we are amending our policy to make sure it meets best practices in relation to the new product that we're getting. And I would say that this is, in light of recent events, this may have come up in questions. Some of our older tasers that are life cycling out, they're all black. These tasers are bright yellow. So it's another safety component that we're excited about, in addition to the compatibility with the body cameras.
I like that.
So I would also like to recognize Mr. Laschetti for his proactive approach to this, giving us an opportunity to have other options in our toolkit when we respond to situations that require us to be a little more aggressive than we would like to be in most situations. But I would also like to recognize that we would be the first small agency in Rowan County to institute the Axon Body Camera 3 and Taser 7. These devices are consistent with meeting the best practices of the law enforcement profession and are utilized by several agencies in our area, to include the Rowan County Sheriff's Office and the Salisbury Police Department. So we would really be adopting a best practice and moving forward with this.
All right, we have a motion.
Mayor and Board, I move that we consider the contract with Axon for the purchase of body cameras and tasers for our police officers, and also the corresponding budget amendment to fund the initial purchase.
I second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
So Mr. Laschetti is the man of the evening. I wanted to give him an opportunity to speak a few minutes about an exciting program that we have coming up, and a proclamation that we have for you this evening with the National Night Out program.
Yes, so I've been speaking about this now for a couple of board meetings. We were full speed ahead with trying to get our plan in place for National Night Out. Of course, that is the first Tuesday of August, and a lot of communities, not just across the state and in our area, but across the country, will be participating. We have secured the YMCA soccer fields. They're going to allow us to utilize their facility for this event. They'll have the bathrooms open for us as well. We've had some vendors interested in sponsoring and being a part of this, and we're very much looking forward to it. As part of that community involvement and making the citizens aware of National Night Out, we have prepared a proclamation, and we ask that the town board consider adopting the proclamation to make Tuesday, August 3rd, National Night Out in Landis. And we're looking forward to hopefully a big turnout with the citizens, nice weather, and be able to interact with the public, not just for the police department, but also we want to showcase public safety as a whole. So this is going to be kind of a twist on it, so to speak. We're going to be highlighting our public safety, police and fire, working together, interacting with the community, and get to know our citizens.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will consider the National Night Out proclamation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Happy National Night Out 2021, Landis. No, sir. All right, we will move to you, Miss.
So tonight, we are going to, we eliminated number
We
13.
removed 13 and we're headed to 14.
Yes, and I will speak to removing 13. We felt like with the lengthy meeting agenda tonight, and we have a few things that are making some changes to our current budget proposal in a good way, so we want to give that the proper amount of time, and we'll be looking at that a little later this evening on when we'll be presenting that to you. Number 14 is consider the adoption of elective tariffs for 21-22. And that will be part of our budget proposal, but we wanted to go ahead and get those in front of you tonight. The only thing changing in our elective tariffs, and they are all here presented for you, and you will see that the renewable energy rates I've highlighted on my memo to you because those are changing. They're not changing substantially, and that's a flat fee that each of our different zones are charged each month. The residential account, the commercial account, and the industrial account each have a flat fee, and that is set by the electricities. So if we did not adopt this portion, we would have to, as a town, supplement the difference between what we're charging now and what is proposed. The only other change is a good change for our citizens, and that our residential rates are moving from 10.5 cents to 9.5 cents per kilowatt. And that is reflected on Residential Service Schedule R, the first page of your rate schedule. So we've summarized the changes in the renewable energy portion on the memo. It can also be found at the end of these residential, or at the end of the rate schedules. And then we have the change on page 1 of the tariffs.
All right. Do we have a motion to adopt the electric tariffs for 2021-2022?
Mayor, I move that we adopt the electric tariffs for 2021/2022.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just thank y'all for lowering that a little bit for the citizens. We appreciate that.
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
So this evening, I also received an offer to purchase two offers on DC Lynn property this month, and am obligated to bring those to you for a decision.
All right. We will look at the first proposal, consideration offer to purchase 2 parcels on West Taylor and the first parcel on Dial Street. Do I have a motion to consider the offers to purchase West Taylor Street and Dial Street?
Mayor and Board, I move that we consider the purchase of properties from West Taylor Street and Dial Street.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I'm gonna go around and get each person's vote.
I second.
All right, at this time, I will go by board member to accept the offer for, West Taylor Street and Dow Street. Mr. Stewart?
At this time, given conversations and development interest in the future for both of those properties, one being near Greenway Stretch and near Linfield, second on Dial Street being there at the corner of Dial and Old Beatty Ford. There's a lot of positive unknowns. At this time, I vote no.
Mr. Evercash?
I vote no.
Ms. Sales?
I also vote no.
Okay. We will move to the consideration to purchase property on West Taylor Street, for the second one.
Mayor and Board, I move that we consider to purchase the property on West Taylor Street, the second offer.
I second that.
I will go around, per board member. Mr. Stewart?
For the same concerns or consideration as mentioned before, my vote is no.
Mr. Overcash?
I agree, no.
Ms. Sales?
No.
Okay. And then we will move to consider 2021-2022 in focus contract.
Mayor and Board, please consider the approval of the attached in-focus contract for the upcoming fiscal year. This contract will cover Susan Klossner as our zoning administrator, who will be in the office for 4 hours, 2 days a week. Bill Bailey as our primary planning professional for 6 hours a week. Richard Flo as our planning, zoning, and subdivision administrator, and John Gaines as our code enforcement officer. Mr. Flo and Mr. Gaines will be on an as-needed basis. With this staff, we will have someone in the office 3 days a week to assist citizens with planning and zoning needs. The advantages to staying with InFocus instead of hiring a full-time planner is the ability to staff at various levels of expertise depending on the specific project. With this proposal, we will have available to us expertise for our growing town that we would not be able to afford on a full-time basis. I believe this is the best solution for our current environment and recommend approving the attached contract.
Do I have a motion?
Mayor and Board, I move that we consider adopting the in-focus contract for 2021-2022.
I second that.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move to 18.
Mayor and Board would like your consideration of approval of the CertaPro Painters contract. You, the Mayor and Board of Aldermen, appropriated money in this budget year for town beautification. We are working diligently to identify areas for beautification. This month, we are bringing to you a contract to paint the Uptown light poles and clock. Ron Miller, the Public Utilities Director, received bids from 5 vendors ranging in price from $2,450 to $16,416. A full list of those participants and their bids is attached for your review. Mr. Miller is recommending that we move forward with CertaPro Painters with a bid of $6,320.29. Their bid will include use of an alkali primer and 2 coats of alkali urethane top coat. The sanding and painting will be done by hand to eliminate the risk of paint spray on other areas around the target. We anticipate work to be completed by the end of May or the beginning of June. Thank you for your consideration.
Do I have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the CertaPro Painters contract.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
We will now move to 18A.
Mayor and Board would like to consider the appointment of Amber Levi to the interim finance officer position. It is with great personal and professional sadness that I announce the resignation of Pam Dubois as our finance officer. She is experiencing an unexpected personal crisis and will not be able to continue in her role. As a town, we owe her a debt of gratitude for providing her expertise, her ability to multitask, and her willingness to help at a moment's notice. She came the day after I called and explained our situation. We were in a time of leadership transition, and there was a lot to be fixed from previous administrations. With her help, we are to a point that we can continue until her successor is found. Personally, she is a dear friend and someone I trust completely. I will miss seeing her in the office, and we will miss her expertise. We will advertise tomorrow for the position. To date, we have found the right people to fill all our leadership positions. I'm confident that will be the case here as well. We are prepared to split the duties until the right candidate is found. North Carolina requires that each town have a finance officer. In the interim, I recommend that Amber Levi be appointed to fill the position. She will not be assuming all the day-to-day operations, and we will ensure appropriate separation of duties whenever possible. We plan to work as a team in Town Hall to segregate those duties as best we can and to make sure we don't miss a beat financially. But I do think that Amber is qualified and in a great position to be able to take that on in the interim.
All right, at this time, do we consider the appointment of Amber Levi to interim finance officer?
Mayor, I move that we appoint Amber Levi to interim finance officer.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, I will ask Ms. Levi to please step forward as I swear her in under the oath of office. Keep my trusty friend right here.
There you go.
All right, I'm gonna try to, your right hand. Yes. I, Amber Levi, do solemnly and sincerely swear that I will support the Constitution and the laws of the United States,
I, Amber Levi, do solemnly and sincerely swear that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States,
that I will faithfully and bear true allegiance to the state of North Carolina and to the constitutional powers and authority which are or may be established for government thereof,
and I will faithfully and bear true allegiance to the state of North Carolina and to the constitutional powers and authorities which are or may be established for the government thereof,
that I will endeavor to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution and laws of said state.
Sorry.
You're good.
That I will endeavor to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution and laws of said state,
Not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States,
not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States,
to the best of my knowledge and ability,
to the best of my knowledge and ability,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office as interim finance officer, so help me God.
where are we?
And that I will faithfully.
And that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office as interim finance officer, so help me God.
Congratulations.
So, Mayor and Board, the financial report is included for you. I do not have a commentary on that this evening. We will look at that in detail next month as we prepare to close out our year end. The manager's report is after that, and I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't have a formal written manager's report for you this evening. It's been a little bit of a day. So, just want to say to you that I think we are now about a month and a half into our new leadership team, and it's changing daily, but we are doing well, and I hope that everything is going to your pleasure, and look forward to bringing to you a budget that will, I think, be favorable to both our town moving forward and to our citizens. We will need to talk about that briefly tonight as we recess this meeting and look at doing a brief budget presentation meeting.
All right, at this time, we will have board comments. I'll start with you, Mr. Evercash.
I just want to say I hate to see a loss of Pam.
I know.
She was a good one. She helped you a lot, I know that.
Yes, she did. I'm not sure I would still be here had she not stepped in when she did. We were thin on people. We had lost a number of people after the administration transfer, and she was truly a godsend and a great friend going forward as well. But it's more important that she take care of her personal situation, and we wish her Godspeed in that. And I told her if she is ever bored one day and things pass, to come on back, we'll find her something to do.
Likewise with Shane Seifert too.
Yes,
and his business.
yes.
Mr. Seifert, you hadn't changed your mind, no? Annexation, this Seifert.
Oh.
I'm pretty set on that.
If you change your mind, let us know.
Alderwoman Stewart? I mean, sales. I usually go back and forth, and I was just gonna go around today. I don't know. Sorry, I apologize.
I want to wish Sergeant Seifert the best in his new endeavors. We wish you the best. Ms. Seifert, you've done a fabulous job. I don't know how you've kept it together, but you've done a good job with
Thank
the
you.
team that you have.
Thank you.
I know that you will find the right person to replace Pam.
Yes, we will.
So we will continue moving on.
Yes, we will.
I also want to say thank you to Parks and Rec.
Jessica Stanford.
Jessica Stanford, for the job she did Friday night for the car show. She did an excellent job, and everyone who helped her.
Mr. Stewart?
No comment.
All right. At this time, I would just like to thank everyone that came tonight, whether you came for the public hearings or you just came. Yes. I got it right here.
Okay, I'm
I got it.
sorry.
No, you're fine.
Oh.
I just want to thank everyone for coming. We like to see your smiling faces and your positive attitudes, so we do appreciate that. I would like to let everyone know that last year we did something called a senior parade for the 2020 graduates. They didn't really get to have a per se quote-unquote traditional graduation, and so we linked up with the town of China Grove, and we went down our parade lineup that we normally would for the Southern Rowing Christmas Parade. This year, we will be doing the same for the class of 2021, and we would like to welcome you all on May the 23rd. We will line up on 3rd and 4th Street in Landis, and we will proceed through the town of Landis into China Grove, just as you would for the Southern Rowing Christmas Parade. We hope to see you all there. It'll start at 6 p.m. Last year they decorated their cars, they had their signs, and we invite the resource officers of each school. We invite Carson High School and South End High School, and they were able to lead all the way through. So we would like to invite any 2021 seniors that would like to attend, and that is all for me, and I appreciate you coming. Thank you so much.
I have one more thing.
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to take a moment to thank the Brook Church.
Yes, we would like to thank the Brook Church and all of their volunteers for Love Landis Week. Check out the gazebo because it looks great. Also, they did some great work out here at the pool, washing off the chairs, getting the concrete pad ready for people to walk on. They also did a bridge over at Lake Coyer so that you can walk over one of the creeks. We truly, truly appreciate how much that you love Landis and how much you want to pour into our town. We appreciate all of your hard work and dedication. At this time, I will ask if I have a motion to adjourn.
We may want to recess.
Oh, we want to recess. When?
Whenever's good for you.
You have your schedule?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, look. Ashley, you have a... Oh.
I think we're really looking at, the public hearing will be in June, and we need to do it in the month of May. And I don't think it will take, but it should not take more than 30 minutes.
If you want to do it next week, I'm available Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Wednesday would be best for me. Wednesday? Daryl? Okay, so we will recess to May 19th.
At what time?
Can we say 5:30? Let's go with 5:30.
Mayor and Board, I move that we recess until May 19th, 5:30 PM here in the chambers at Town Hall.
Second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting recessed.